Okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Lady Leadership Show. My name's Sam McIntyre. I'm really excited today to have wonderful guest on the show, Mary Beth Hosking. Now, Mary Beth started her career as a singer. She transitioned to a CIO, working in technology, and now she's a CEO. And so she's had multiple changes in her career. She's just written a new book, which is called When Now Means Now. Handbook for career change, advancement, and progression. Welcome to the show, Mary Beth.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am really excited to be talking to you and your audience.
Thank you. Now, when now means now. Tell me a little bit about the book and tell me, why you wanted to write the book as well. Let's go.
Well, from my perspective, as you said, I started out as a singer and then moved through the corporate world. And I had that moment when I was much younger where all I wanted to do was sing. And then there came a point in time when it wasn't. And there was that, oh God moment. And I thought, I need to be doing something that I really want to do. And I had seen all of my friends who were working in the corporate space. And I thought, oh gosh, that looks really interesting. So I thought, I want to try that. And so I made a complete career pivot. And it was quite frightening when I did that because I had no skills in that space, no skills from an office perspective, corporate perspective. And so I had to start again. And for me, it was really that, well, people think I'm a failure because I haven't achieved what I wanted or the success I was aiming for as a singer. What would they think? And that was really important to me. What would other people think? But at the end of the day, singing wasn't bringing me joy anymore. And I needed to find joy again in what it is that I was doing. And so therefore, I say in the book, I say a lot to people, don't be afraid to pivot. Be afraid not to. Because
yeah, it's really interesting, right? Because a lot of people would probably kind of find themselves in corporate and then go, oh, singing is the thing that I love and I want to sing, and therefore they'd kind of you sometimes see that story the opposite way around, whereas you'd gone for what brought you joy, which was singing, and then it became a job and you didn't enjoy it anymore.
That's right. It became unfulfilling for me. When you have dreams and aspirations and you are not fulfilling those, it then just becomes drudgery, doesn't it? It's like that with any job. And so I talk a lot in the book about joy, finding joy. What are those things that you really enjoy about a job? If you can find something that gives you 60 to 70% of it is the stuff that really resonates for you, then you can deal with the 30% minutiae that will always be in a role. That you can't get away from that. There's always going to be the bits where you think, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to write that business case. I don't want to have to do those pieces. But it's about really flipping the role on its head and really thinking about the joyousness of what it is that you do, and then making decisions based on that and planning. Oh God, plan. I speak to people so often. I do a lot of mentoring, and when I speak to individuals, I say, so tell me, how did you get to where you're at now? Oh, I don't know. I just sort of fell into it.
Yes.
And then they get to that moment of, and we've all had that moment of, oh my God, I can't do this job anymore. I need to do something else. This is doing my head in. And what do we do at that moment? We panic. We realize our resume is not really up to snuff. We look at our network and think, oh gosh, I've let that go a little bit, haven't I? And then we start to apply for roles that are exactly the same as what we're doing because it's comfortable. We know we can do that. And then we wind up taking another role somewhere else, but it's the same role, just a different organization. And then in a couple of years' time, you're right back at that, oh, I can't do this anymore. So when you make a pivot, really think about what brings you joy, what you want to do, and plan it. Really think about, what are the things that I need to achieve that new goal? Don't just let it happen to you. Don't let your career happen to you.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's so true. That is so true. I love that. I think it's you're so right in that, because I agree 100%. I always say, what's the next job and the job after that? Like, where are you actually heading? What are you trying to achieve? Why? And if you don't figure those things out, then when opportunities come to you, you're not going to say yes to the right things. And so I always say yes to opportunity, but that's if you've figured out what your career vision is, what your career mission is. You've got a plan, and then when things come, you can go, okay, does that fit in within that plan, or is that actually something outside of that? And if it's outside of it, you still might consider that, and you still might look at that, but you do it through that lens of knowing where you want to take things. And it's not a straight line to the top or anything either. Like, there's lots of sidestepping and lots of different opportunities. Talk to me then, why tech, and talk to me about like that pivot from singing into tech, and how that, because I think that will help the audience around people who are perhaps working in an area. And so this is a funny example. My farrier. Now, if you don't know what a farrier is someone who trims horses' feet and puts on shoes. So for the audience, my farrier is thinking he might like to get into tech because his body probably can't do the job as a farrier for, say the next 15 years, because you are literally picking up horses' feet all day and, hammering and all the rest of it. So So I've had an interesting conversation about kind of getting into tech with him. But tell me about, so you can, that's an entirely different career opportunity, someone banging horses' shoes to moving into tech. Yeah, tell me what that looked like for yourself.
So I was singing, and my father was a musician, a working musician for many years, and he suddenly passed away. He was, I think for me, he was the person I was trying to please the most and impress the most. And he was my inspiration, and then he was gone, and it was very sudden. And I needed to, I remember thinking at the very final gig that my partner and I at the time were doing, I was thinking it was a 7-hour gig. I was singing covers. I was asked to sing Mustang Sally 6 times in that 7 hours. And I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. I just don't want to do this. This is not what I want to be doing. I wanted to write my own things. I wanted to do my own things. I wanted to create in my way and not sing other people's materials. And my father wasn't there anymore. And I just thought, what am I doing? And so, and then I always sort of looked at my friends who were working in corporate 9 to 5, had evenings to go out for dinner, whereas I was gigging and doing things at night. And so I was never seeing them. And it was just, I thought, this is not inspirational for me. It's just not floating my boat. So I thought, I don't know what corporate area I want to work in. And so for me, it was, I've always believed, and I sort of think of your career as a smorgasbord or a buffet restaurant.
Yeah. No.
Right. So you finish high school, you can have the soup and salad, right? You get your university degree, then you can have the carvery. And you get another course or qualification, you can have the dessert bar, etc., etc. I kind of think of it that way. You have experience, then you can have the seafood selection.
Yeah.
So I always thought about it that way, and I thought, well, you know what? I know how to get us to a gig. I know how to work with customers. I know how to do those sorts of things, because I have to do that when you're trying, you're selling your services as a singer or as a band. And I thought, I don't really know what industry I want to work in. And this is that, now let's be real, this is like in the early 90s, 1991 or 92. No internet. You kind of have to do a lot of research by asking around and sort of working it out. And I thought, I'm going to temp. So for those on this podcast who don't know what temping is, this is when you would go into an organization for 1 day to 4 weeks, backfilling someone in reception or an administration sort of role, where they needed to have somebody that would just fill the space while someone else is on leave or sick leave.
Yeah.
I don't really know if they do a lot of temping these days. It's more contract-based work. But anyway, I started interviewing for temping agencies and went to about 30 interviews. and could not get a look in. They were really keen to talk about music and all that sort of stuff, but no one was interested in giving me a chance, which was really disheartening because it was like, well, I'm not doing this anymore, so where am I going to earn my money?
Yeah.
And then I went to one temping agency, and it just happened that the woman there had seen me at my last gig. She was at that wedding, and she said, "You look really familiar." I said, "Do I?" And we went through and we talked about it, and she said, "Oh my God, you were that singer. That was your band." She said, "That was really good." She said, "You did that 7 hours. That was really long." I said, "Yes, yes, it was." And then we started to talk.
And so you sung Mustang Sally 6 times? No.
She probably called out from the audience. Anyway, so we started, she said, "Talk to me about the process, what you have to go through." So at that point, I was speaking to her about, well, I need to speak to my agent. We had 3 different agents, and I needed to speak to them every week to try and line up gigs. We needed to work out the size of the venue. I worked out the size of the venue, how we would get the gear to the venue, because you'd have to take in all your own gear, what that would cost, all of the costs associated with it, knowing which gigs to accept and which ones not to. Sometimes a gig would pay you a lot more, but it would be for one event, but then there'd be one that would be 4 events. And so you'd look at that and say, okay, well, that was much better, so we'll take that and do this. And so she sat down, she was making notes. She wrote down stakeholder engagement, project management, logistics. And she replayed that for me, but using corporate speak. And I sat there thinking, wow, that sounds really impressive, doesn't it?
Yeah,
She said, "You've got all of these skills. It's just about how do you think about them differently and transfer them to where we're going and where you want to go." And then she gave me my very first temping gig, which was at a little company in South Bank. They had this small little office, and they were called Apple Computer. And I walked into the office. I actually got told off by the general manager there because I actually answered the phone Apple Computers with an S. And he said to me, "It's not Apple Computers, it's Apple Computer, no S." I was like, oh. And then I said, "Well, where's the little," so back in the 90s, like back in the day, you'd have a small little notepad that you would write messages on if you worked reception. And then you'd take those messages and pop them into little pigeonholes for the team members that would come in, they'd get those and they'd return calls. They showed me, they don't use that. They used this thing. It's a thing called email. And I remember sitting there going, oh my God. I got home and I said to my partner at the time, who was, like I said, I'm at this gig and it's Apple Computer. And he said, "Oh my God, you're joking." I said, "No." He said, "Oh, how exciting." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, they're the next big thing." And I'm like, "Oh, really?" And then I told him about this thing called email. I said, "That'll never take off." So I'm not a futurist. However,
you were in on the ground though.
What it showed me was this stuff is moving really rapidly, and I'm really curious. I'm just curious. And my then partner, future husband, we were the same. We were really curious. We both got into IT. He got into it from a purely technical side. Yep. I got into it from that UX, customer facing side, that usability space, and that's where it started. But it was just sitting in that organization and thinking, wow, this stuff's really interesting. And then everything seemed to evolve. And then every role I had taken, I went into transport logistics, and that was in the IT space. Yeah. Before sign on glass. I mean, there was a time when you had paper-based consignments, everything was paper, and we were just starting to look at sign on glass and all of those sorts of technologies. So it really was at the beginning of it all. That's so exciting.
Some of them still have paper. They haven't made that transition.
Well, it's a commodity, and all that tech is very expensive for the commodity. So
yeah, absolutely. And so look, just tell me then, just take me through the book a bit, and how it would help people.
So the book starts off, and it really is about what the reason for writing was. I sat back and I thought, well, my journey is pretty interesting, I think, but what I've learned along the way were things such as building your resilience, especially when you're going through. So as a singer, I did a lot of cattle calls. Cattle calls are, if you watch things like America's Got Talent and those sorts of things, you've got hundreds of people and they go in and they have a number on their chest. Okay, that's a cattle call. And when you're a performer, you will take your headshot, you'll go in and you'll walk in, you will have prepared 3 songs, and they will look at your headshot and they will say to you, no, you're not appropriate. You wouldn't even have opened your mouth.
Right. Wow.
So it's really quite cutthroat, because you've got hundreds of people there all wanting their spot in the limelight. So I learned a lot of resilience. So when I was trying to get to the C-suite, I applied for about 50 roles, 50 roles over the course of the time that I was looking for that. That was like 8 years, 50 roles to try and break through to the C-suite. I even said at one point to my husband, my neck is so sore from hitting my head on the glass ceiling, I don't know what to do anymore. So I've written about those sorts of experiences in the book, what I did, the path I've taken, really understanding transferable skills, knowing which feedback to take and which not. You'll get a lot of feedback in your time, and some of it is really valid, and some of it you just, I think, ignore. But it's knowing which feedback to ignore.
And then some of it can be valid years later. So years later you can go, oh, okay, actually I know what they meant now. And I think there's a real skill in there not being kind of defensive, but sometimes you're not ready to hear stuff either.
Well, that's right. I learned how to take feedback and constructive criticism as a singer, because
with those 50 roles, what do you think kind of finally got you there? Was that like a practice test of, what to put in my CV, what to call out from a skills perspective? Did it end up being, the point that got you there? Was it, through people that you knew? Was it, the persistence? How would you describe it?
Sponsorship is what you're talking about, the people that you know, those people that are going to advocate for you. Wasn't actually sponsorship for that CIO role. I engaged an executive coach and worked with her. And then I did a lot of work on my internal branding, external branding, and my virtual branding. So if you jump on LinkedIn and have a look at my profile, it's really curated. And I've made an absolute point of being very, very clear about who I am and the value that I bring.
Yeah, nice.
And so those were the branding piece, huge piece. And then I wrote my first book. And my first book, in fact, really opened the door for me. And now I'm not saying that everyone needs to write a book, but you have to have a point of differentiation. And what is that going to be? And is that your transferable skills, or is it something else? So I found my point of differentiation, and with my executive coach, really honed my interview skills. Because that's it. C-suite, interviewing for C-suite, very different to middle management, executive, etc. But that next step up, you've really got to hone those skills.
Yeah, describe that for me. What do you think?
So from that, in the C-suite, you really need to have a very clear understanding of the value you bring, quantifiable and qualitative. So make sure that in your resume, it is very clear. What value did you bring? Don't fluff you've got 3 pages, and then that first page, you've really got to make that sharp, punchy, and get straight to the point. You need to add the value, and whether that is money value, dollar value, whether that's a savings, or whatever those things were that you did in each role, and make that very, very specific.
Yeah, and for the audience, let's just describe it a little bit more, right? It's saying I saved $5 million when I did X.
Absolutely.
Or cost, whatever. It's like those achievements and the outcomes that you got in that role. And if you're not in the C-suite, it's your part that you've played in developing that as well. So I was on a team that did X.
Yeah, and also understand that it's when you're interviewing, I statements, not we.
Yeah.
I statements.
As long as you did do it.
Well, when you're a leader of a team, you set the strategy. I set the strategy. My team delivered and executed on that strategy, but they couldn't have executed if they didn't have the strategy. Yeah. So therefore, it is the things that I have done, and that's what we need to recognize. The other thing is this: a lot of women will look at a role, they'll look at a job description, and they'll go, "Ooh, I've only got 5 or 6 of those 10, 12 criteria. I'm not going to apply for that. Apply for it, because you will have transferable skills for the other areas. A lot of women I talk with, they will overeducate, do a course after course, just because they feel that they need to. Whereas a male counterpart, he'll see, oh, I've got 2 or 3 of those things, I'll apply for that role.
Yeah. Did you ever come across, and because this is something I've experienced in my career, that you've done things but people don't quite believe you and you're trying to justify that you actually have done something? Did you ever kind of come across that in interviews, etc.? Sort of like that proof? No?
Not really, no. I think if you speak with, I do speak with authority.
Yeah.
The one, I think that's from the performing side. I speak very much with authority, and I've not been, I was questioned when I was younger.
Okay.
To be honest, but not now that I'm older. Also, I've not had that personally.
Yeah. Okay, that's all right. That's all right. I mean, that's good. And so those 50 jobs, it was practicing, working out what worked, working out what didn't work, having the assistance of a coach to help you, getting really clear on your value proposition to the organisation to then get that opportunity.
Absolutely. And not ever giving up.
Yeah, not giving. I think that's really key, right? Because I think people give up, right? They go, oh, no, this is a bit too hard. And actually, I'm quite happy where I am, or I'm quite happy staying at this level, because it is hard. There are only, it's like a triangle. The more senior you get, the fewer jobs there are at that level. So the more competitive it is. And so you do have to be really resilient to be able to move into those positions. And then it's difficult when you're there.
And when you're there, you feel you have to sort of, overperform when you're in the role. But I say this, when you've been given that role, they've seen the value you're going to bring.
Yeah.
So just bring the value that you know how to do. Just do what you know how to do, because that's what you've been working all that way toward. It would just be really nice to see more women in the C-suite, which is why I'm in the new role. The role that I've taken now is to really start to lift the profile of women in STEM. I think that is incredibly important.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Mary Beth. Tell me a little bit about that role. So for the listeners, CEO at Vic
ICT for Women. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Vic ICT for Women is a not-for-profit organisation where we endeavour to help women throughout their career life cycle. So from primary school to high school, through into graduate, university, and then into their working life. So we run events, have programs. We have a full community of women there to support you as you go through your career life cycle. And you can look us up. Our website and our LinkedIn, our social presence is quite prolific in Victoria.
Yep.
And
you've got you can become a member, is that right?
Absolutely, you can join up as a member. If we've got anyone on here that is looking to sponsor as well, it's all not for profits. Everything folds back into the organisation. It's fully volunteer led.
Right.
So it is a it has a functioning board. It's an amazing organisation. And the reason that I took this space or took this role is I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm just so tired of standing up at tech events and looking out into a sea of faces and seeing 15 women in 300 men. And I think that we need to shift the dial, and we haven't shifted the dial. So we need to do more in that space.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I met up with a principal at a girls' school just recently, and she said that they had focused on maths and focused on STEM for the last 15 years, and 50% of their graduates go into STEM at university. And so what we know is, if you measure it, if you focus on it, if you give people the opportunity, then we're not like, girls are interested in technology. 2 examples sitting right here. And so it's what you put around girls and how you encourage them, I think, as well.
I think so. I think what we need to be looking at is we need more male feminists out there, and we also need what I also say, and I absolutely believe, it's not about displacing somebody for somebody else. It's about recognizing skill and the skill and the diversity that you bring into your organization. And it's about diversity. You want diversity of thought.
Yeah. It's about representing the community as we stand. So, you know, we've got 50% male and females. So we just want organizations, corporate organizations, to represent and have, you know, a diversity of voices all throughout the organizations.
Absolutely. Through all tiers.
Through all tiers, across all areas. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. So books out. You're busy with Vic ICT. You mentioned you're just about to head off to Italy to have a little bit of a break. Where can people, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Mary Beth, and how can people buy the book?
Okay, link with me on LinkedIn. That is my platform of preference. And I have a newsletter on LinkedIn, etc. And I do quite a lot of posting. I'm quite active in that space. I think that's an area where I can add a lot of value. So I do spend a lot of time in there. If you want to buy the book, you can go to my website, which is www.quantumtransformation.com.au, or you can purchase it online from all of the online retailers such as Amazon, etc.
Yeah. Look, I think a great book, you know, if someone's wanting a change, not happy where they are, I think it's a really great handbook for someone to give you the steps of how you can change where you're at, and proof, you know, you can go from singing to CEO. Well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the show, Mary Beth.